Good morning, everybody. It's the one day of the month when I get to feel important. So we have the pleasure of introducing Jim McFarlin. Jim is an author and popular international speaker on cybersecurity and cyber terrorism, former Air Force officer and high-tech CEO in Silicon Valley who participated firsthand in the evolution of 4 generations of computing. Jim is in a unique position to provide informed perspective on America's threats from cyber terrorism. He recently addressed the World Affairs Council, the Global Cybersecurity Conference in New York, and the Churchill Society in British Columbia. He is active in the Air Force Association's Cyber Patriot Youth Cyber Education Program and is national cybersecurity columnist for Security Week magazine. His Tom Clancy-style cyber thriller, Aftershock, a novel, was published in March of 2014. Jim's going to address America on the Brink, the coming wars of cyberspace. Everybody please welcome Jim McFarlin.
Thank you, Philip. Well, good morning, old pilots. It is really great. I go to a number of groups here in the desert. I've been here 6 years, and unfortunately, a number of the military-associated groups are declining in membership and activities, and your group is growing, and I applaud you for that. Very, very important to be able to do that. We're going to take a little different track today. Last month, you heard from Bert Upson, who talked about his experience in escaping from Tower 2 during 9/11. He was talking about the past. I'm going to talk more about today and the future, and tell you a little bit about what's going on in cyberspace. I want to start 100 years ago with World War I, because that was really where aircraft were introduced to warfare, my understanding. I don't think they were used in the Civil War. And they played a good role, but basically what it did was it really changed the nature of warfare as they knew it, and we still know it, forever. And it was 100 years ago, made a lot of progress since then. 50 years later, technology came to bear, and the ICBMs changed forever, almost forever, our system for national defense. And today, and this is what I'm going to talk about, we're going to get another revolution of weaponry, and today it is cyber weaponry. And I always hesitate to use that term cyber because a lot of people think I'm talking about science fiction, or that I'm talking about Star Wars, and it is neither Star Wars nor science fiction, but it is an actuality. The nature of cyber attacks are such that they occur without warning. There's no incoming missiles, there's no fleets of bombers, there's no submarines off the coast. The attack is instantaneous. You can send an attack, by way of example, from Beijing to Washington, D.C. and back in less time than it takes for a fastball to go from the pitcher's mound to the batter. It's that fast. The third thing to remember about the cyber attacks is that they are primarily anonymous. In other words, if you listen to some things on the news and they say, well, gee, we had this attack at the White House the other day, we're not really sure who did it, might have been the Russians, that attack at J.P. Morgan, but we don't know this. They're very, very difficult to trace because the people that are launching the attacks hide it. Now, our military is taking this threat very seriously. The Department of Defense has classified cyberspace as the 5th domain of war. And the 16 intelligence agencies of our country have identified cyber terrorism as the top threat facing the United States. The Defense Department also set up many of you know about this being military people, 5 years ago, the U.S. Cyber Command. Now, Cybercom, in the wake of our military forces being drawn down to pre-World War II levels, Cybercom is staffing up. They are in the process of hiring 6,000 more cybersecurity specialists to get to a complement of 10,000. And they will be using outside contractors multiple times with that. They have two missions. One is to protect the networks of our military organizations in cyberspace, and second is to build offensive weapons for us to use against those who attack us. Or maybe, as you'll see, to use them before they attack us, so that they don't. So that's their mission. What going on there? The three areas that I'll talk about today, as we go through this, is there's cyber warfare, there's cyber terrorism, and there is cyber crime. Of those three, the one that we hear the most about is cyber crime. So you're hearing about the credit card theft, you're hearing about J.P. Morgan getting hit, and that was credit card theft. I mean, that's uncomfortable. If you know anybody who's lost their credit card or lost their identity, it's very uncomfortable. But I can assure you that compared to what is in store for us, that is, I call those the fins in the water. You know that there's trouble as you see the fin, but you really don't know how much trouble you're in. So my goal this morning is to dig beneath the surface, to really look at sharp. If we can do that, then I will accomplish my objective. First, just a couple of definitions, because I think this is important to level set. People say to me, they say, well, what is the cyberspace, and what's it got to do with the internet, and what does all that mean? And I'm trying to answer it this way. The internet is a message routing system. That's all it does. It was developed by the Department of Defense, well, by scientists and engineers, funded by the Department of Defense, late 60s, early 70s. Its purpose was to route messages. It has no security basis. It doesn't check anything, doesn't look at it. It just routes it. That's all it does. Cyberspace is all the stuff that goes with it. The software, everything that's on your cell phones, your smartphones, the satellite transmission of information and data, undersea water cables, all that stuff. There's this whole ecosystem. And probably for you, the best way to think about it is that the internet is to cyberspace as the air traffic control system is to aviation. They're kind of related in that sense of point of view. And as you all know, the internet has taken over our lives. It's got many benefits. Unfortunately, and with most things, there is a flip side. And the flip side is that the internet is also a huge battlefield. And you don't always see what's going on, and that's why I'm talking to you today about that. Let's talk about a couple of these retailers that were hit, just so you get an idea of what's going on. That's the customer's money leaving the Target store. There, let me stop that. The Target case was interesting. This occurred almost a year ago, where they had just installed a brand new $1.6 million cybersecurity system to protect their networks. They had just hired an outside firm to monitor all of their systems 24/7. In spite of that, 3 months later, they were hit with a scheme where software went to the point of sale terminals, and as you swiped your credit card, it took your information and sent it to whoever was gathering it. We think in Russia. Okay? Not the Russian government necessarily, but in Russia. And that went on for 3 weeks. Target did not know about it. They found out about it from the Secret Service, and the Secret Service, who monitors payment systems fraud, saw that there were problems with the credit cards from Target and let them know. Once they alerted Target, it still took Target 5 weeks to get all of those systems clean. So all of that time, from the 3 weeks that they didn't know about it to the 5 weeks that they were correcting it, they're still gathering our data. And the example here is to show that even with the latest defenses, it's very, very difficult to defend what's going on. Target's story is not over. They end up firing their CEO. They fired their top 2 IT executives. They have over 100 lawsuits pending, and they're going to be dealing with this for years. Very, very difficult situation. Home Depot learned absolutely nothing from the Target thing. They knew about it. They had a few meetings. They ordered some software. They were next. eBay, you'd think eBay would be an absolutely lock-proof cyber firm. I mean, that's their business, operated on the internet. Wrong. 143 million accounts. Password's gone. In other words, you can go in, my account, do what you want with the password. All of those had to be reset. 143 million, they couldn't stop it. Fidelity Investments, I won't go into all these things. One of the more recent is JP Morgan. This one is notable because JP Morgan is considered to be, with regard to banks, the financial services industry, the gold standard with regard to cybersecurity. They spend $250 million a year on cybersecurity. They have over 3,000 cybersecurity specialists, and yet they got hit not once, but twice. 76 million households and 7 million businesses. And there's X amount of information that's gone. They either don't know or they're not telling us. Major hit. So other people are saying, wait a minute, if JP Morgan can get hit, we can get hit. That's very scary. So the lessons here, just want to go through these quickly, is that number one, you can't see these coming. Number two, it's very difficult to defend from them. And number three, once you're hit, it can take forever to get rid of what we call it malware, the malicious software. It's difficult. So what I'd like to really do, those are kind of the fins above the water, is to look at some more critical targets and home in on 2 things that are particularly vulnerabilities for us. First is intellectual property. We are losing, by many estimates, between 300, 500 billion a year in intellectual property. Those are military secrets, corporate plans, military plans, you name it. The biggest person, the biggest country doing this is China. And they, of course, adamantly state that they do not take any of our information. And we all spy on each other. We spy on them, they spy on us. But this is commercial information. A lot of it's commercial information. So this is a big thing. They are stealing our future. So if you're a corporation or a military organization and you have these plans, you're going to find yourself competing against those same plans by them. Weapon systems, every single weapon system that we have, right after the F-35, has been copied and is gone. Still there, but it is gone. And there's nothing that can be done to stop that. It just keeps going on and on and on. It's scary. Military plans, the Department of the Navy recently found that their internal communication system had been hacked. And they didn't know for how long. It was a year, 2 years. All of their internal communications was being monitored. Once they found out about it, it took them 5 months to get rid of it. So this is kind of scary. So all the communications within the Department of the Navy gone. Financial markets are a particular concern to most people with regard to cyber security because our economy is what drives, obviously, a large part of the country. Now, Jack Lew is the Secretary of the Treasury, and his comment was cyber attacks could cause catastrophic damage to the U.S. financial system. He said that recently, said that July 17th. Now, Jack Lew, being a public official in high regard and high rank, cannot go around making comments that are not serious. And so for me to see him say this, one thing to believe this is quite another thing to say it, indicates that he thinks there's some vulnerabilities with the financial system, which there are. The NASDAQ stock exchange, we like to think of that as being solid. This particular story was broken by Bloomberg Business Week about a hack that was discovered on the NASDAQ Stock Exchange in 2010, and there were 90 some odd different computer servers that had been infiltrated with something. They didn't know what it was doing. It was sitting there like a time bomb. They brought in the CIA, they brought in the NSA, they brought in all the experts, the FBI. This thing went all the way to the White House saying, what are we going to do with this? Because they're almost afraid to touch it. You know, it's like one of those things you dance around the bomb, you're afraid you touch it, it's going to go off. And so finally they decided they had to figure it out, which they did. It took them quite a while to get it off their servers. And they, in forensics, looked at it and decided that what it was doing was monitoring activity on the stock exchange, operations and trading and that type of thing. And it was sending that data off somewhere, they think, again to Russia. And that was that, which sounds pretty benign. However, that same software with some modifications could also be used to disrupt trading. We're going to talk about that in just a second. Very scary that the NASDAQ could be infiltrated for a year, 2 years, and we don't know about it. There's a lot of you remember, I'm sure, the Goldfinger movie. Okay, the basic story was Goldfinger has a lot of gold. He wants his gold to be worth more money. So what he does is he's going to destroy the gold in Fort Knox and make the value of his gold go up. This is all that cyber criminals have to do to wreak havoc with our stock market. They don't have to go in there and steal our money. They don't have to go in there and take down the markets, although they probably can. All they have to do is disrupt trading. And what happens when they start disrupting trading? And pretty soon, the institutions start saying, maybe we don't really want our money here. We don't want our money in London or the German exchange. And if that's the case, then these big institutions, if they don't feel their data is safe, then they start selling. What happens when they start selling? Price of securities go down. That means our investment accounts, our retirement accounts, all follow suit. And as we saw from the 2008 recession, that it is very easy for prices on the exchange to drop 50%. It's not unheard of. Fortunately, they've come back primarily since then. So this is all they need to do, is disruption. There was an exercise on Wall Street last December called Quantum Dawn 2. I don't know who comes up with these names. And its purpose was to test the resiliency of the aggregate of Wall Street against cyber attack. They spent a year and a half putting this together. There were 100 organizations involved, not only the brokerage firms, but the investment banks, the exchanges, the tradings, the exchanges, clearinghouses, government agencies, everybody. It's 500 people involved. They have a one-day exercise. This is a simulation. One-day exercise, and Wall Street is going to show off their stuff to demonstrate that they can ward off these attacks. They hired an outside firm to make the attacks. No one knew what they were going to do. Within 3 hours, they were able to start disrupting trading prices. So all of a sudden, prices were fluctuating. A little after 4 hours later, they had to close the trading. So it was not a good day for Wall Street in terms of resiliency. However, the official reports, which I saw from that particular exercise, said this was very successful because we learned how to communicate with one another. The two observers who were there, independent observers, I looked at their reports, they both independently, they did not work together, they both rated Wall Street's resiliency against cyber attack as an F. And they're totally not ready. The second point of major vulnerability that I wanted to cover is the power grids. Now, we have 5 power grids. You've got Alaska up here, got the western, which goes to the Rockies. Eastern power grid goes Rockies all the way to the east, extends up into Canada, as you can see, a little bit into Mexico. Then Texas has its own power grid. Texas has its own everything, you know, gun laws, voter registration, whatever. Well, they got their own power grid. So if we get hit here in the West Coast, just get to Texas. They'll be happy to have you. So the risk here is, okay, well, and this is what my book starts as, is the Western grid coming down, and then what is the response to that. Is really what the book is about. And so these are connected. Just because one goes down doesn't mean they all will go down. But what makes up these power grids? It makes up there are about 1,950 utility companies that are providing power. There are 3,800 power generating facilities. Those companies are, some of them are privately owned, some are publicly owned, some are part of big corporations, some are municipally owned, some are federally government owned. They are all over the place. They have a trade group, but they are not under any amount of total control. So they are vulnerable. Those power generating facilities are vulnerable. We have hard evidence that both Russia and China have been inside some of those facilities and haven't done anything. They're just getting ready, I guess. And so there's been a high level of interest in raising their level of security, or cyber security. 3 years in a row in Congress, the bill introduced to mandate minimum cybersecurity standards for the utilities. 3 years in a row, it was voted down. Why? They're lobbied. The lobby basically said, look, we're not against security, we, collectively, the 1,950, but if you want it, U.S. government, you pay for it, i.e., taxpayer pays for it. So, as a result, this is a stalemate. The outgoing head, last May, I believe, General Keith Alexander, outgoing head of the National Security Agency, he said on a scale of 1 to 10, he would give the safety of the power grids a 3. So he has nothing to gain by that. He's out of his position. Very, very dangerous. And so if they're hit, I mean, here's basically what things look like. The power's out. Water pumps don't work. Gasoline pumps don't work. Yeah, everything comes to a halt. And it only takes 5 or 6 days until things bad start to happen. There was, you remember Katrina? There was a hospital in New Orleans that was isolated. And by day 4, that hospital, they had generators, but they had to ration out the power because they couldn't operate everything in the hospital. And they couldn't run everybody's equipment. So they had to go around and say, sorry, we can't let you run that respirator anymore. We need that power for the operating. Sorry, we can't let you. And they went all the way around. By day 4, they started to have body bags in the hallways. And by day 6, they had widespread death in the hospital until the helicopters could reach them because they were out of power, they were out of water, they were out of medicines, and they were flat out of time. And that's how quickly it can happen. Very, very quickly. Locally, the big institutions, the cities have backup generators. In my case, Rancho Mirage, that has enough power for 4 days and it needs more gasoline. There's no way to get gasoline. Eisenhower Hospital has generators, same thing, 4 days, and you're out. So things pretty much come to a halt when the power goes out. It's not just the power. You can't pump the water, you can't pump the gas, you can't get your television operating, nothing happens. And so it's very, very dangerous, and protecting those should be a high priority, but it's not, unfortunately. So let's talk about some of the people who are doing this. I've given this in my list of the top 5 aggressors. It's the United States. My list is not an official list. First is Russia. And their use of cyber technology goes back, even predates when they invaded Georgia and Estonia. They used cyber technology to cut off communications within those countries. And so they use it today in Ukraine. They use it against us. And as you all know, Russia has some expansionist plans. Putin has some expansion plans. He really would like to see the old Russia expanded. So he's using cyber as one method of many. He's also using threats elsewhere. He's threatening the Baltics. He's got, just saw this recently, there were B-24 of their planes intercepted by NATO fighters recently. They have reconnaissance flights over Guam, over Pearl Harbor, 45 miles off the San Francisco coast, and they are on the move. So very, very dangerous in terms of watching out for them. I would say of the skills worldwide in cyber terrorism, that we're number one, that Russia would be up there number two. Number two aggressor is China. I mentioned it before. Their primary thing is they are taking intellectual property. Now, China does not want to come in and destroy our economy. I mean, who would buy their stuff? You know, where would Walmart get their stuff? So they have no interest in that whatsoever. They want us to flourish so we'll get more stuff. However, they have a couple of things in mind. One is they would like to take a shortcut to new weapons and to new corporate directions, new inventions, new products, and we are the source of most of that stuff. Secondly, they would like to know what our response is going to be like militarily if they launch a cyber attack. So they're in doing both those things, looking at us very, very closely. We've had many talks with them. The president was here, spoke with President Obama a little over a year ago, and nothing became of that. Number three, Iran. Now, Iran is in the news because they are, I used to say, lurching toward an atomic weapon. They're now cruising toward one, and it's just a matter of time. And they are highly sophisticated users of cyber weaponry. They have, on numerous occasions, attacked our banking networks and brought them down. We have no access to your accounts, no access to your ATMs, no access to anything. They tend to use a proxy so that we can't blame them. They tend to use the Syrian Electronic Army with a bunch of independents who come in and do the work for them, and Iran can say, we didn't do that. No, hands off. Very dangerous in terms of where they're going. Number four is the cyber militias. I was in a briefing. I go to 3 two-day briefings a year on cybersecurity in New York and Washington. And one of them last year, the topic was the top 50 largest cyber militias. I didn't even know there were 50 cyber militias. These are independents. They are hackers for hire. The militias for hire. The military for hire. You want to, it doesn't matter. If it's cyber crime and you say, gee, I'd like to have 100,000 American Express cards of these characteristics, they'll go get them. I'd like to say, gee, we'd really like to get into those U.S. bank networks. They will do it. And they also have an ecosystem around it. They can purchase tools on their darknet black market. They have people, they have computers to run the attacks, they have data centers. It's a whole software industry in itself. So these guys are a real wild card. Number 5. Now the map up here, I'm sorry, the red is actually a little more. This is a week old, so they've actually taken a little more territory since this. It moves quickly, doesn't it? So I point out ISIS because ISIS is a very accomplished user of technology. And we see it manifest itself in Facebook, Twitter, social media. They're using it for recruiting, using it for training, using it to get people all fired up, put a lot of messages out there. So they're very dangerous, and they do not have the ability to do, to our knowledge, too much to us. But what if they brought in the militias who did it for them? So one of the key questions is, let me just put all 3 of these up. Why are we not able to defend ourselves? And, so we just look at the 3 elements of cyber attack: the prevention, defense, and then the mitigation. Defense, we pretty much showed you that we don't have a defense. The mitigation has to do with, once it's happened, how do we clean it up? It's like bringing in the undertakers after the bank robbers have left town. So it comes back to prevention, and that's where the NSA lives. Now, one of the reasons that it's difficult to defend is because the attackers have the first move. They know when, where, and how they're going to attack. We know none of those things. We're responding. So if we were attacking the other way, it would be just the opposite. Defense is not just technology. It has several parts. It has a technology basis. Most of the systems that we're running today, militarily and corporate-wise, were not developed with high levels of security in mind. Security has been bolted on. It's not that effective. And until we get a whole new generation of systems that are built from the ground up with security built in, then we're going to have this problem. Politics, we have essentially no national leadership on what to do about this problem. We have no national priorities. We have no national discussion, and that is a real problem. Third is there are attitudes. These are huge headwinds. There is disbelief, there's denial, and corporations are starting to get it because of the Target thing, the JP Morgan is starting to say, maybe we are really, vulnerable. You may not be able to read this, but it says, there's a little meeting of the company, we need to rethink our strategy of hoping the internet will just go away. And so there's a lot of that out there, and it's a real headwind. Also, security is a team sport. Now, going back to the Target thing just for a minute, Target had all these wonderful new things, but it was kind of like putting a pilot in a new cockpit without a simulator. Said, okay, fly this thing. So they're sitting there with new software, they weren't quite sure what it meant and everything, because they were getting alerts every single day from their monitoring firm that they were under attack, and they ignored everyone.
That's why the guy got fired.
Okay, yes, that's exactly right. Finally, in terms of human factors, insider betrayal, Edward Snowden, I don't have to tell you how much damage he has done and continues to do. So that's a real risk. So the total threat market in terms of vulnerability looks like this. Effective defenses and protected power grid. The NSA has been crippled. It's going to be crippled more by legislations because of politics. Political deadlock in Congress, force reduction, can't get the power grids covered, and the threats are increasing. This is not good. And so it takes us back to where we started here, and that is this the way that we're going to end up? And I'll just say, I'll repeat what I said earlier about the National Security Agency, is they are in the problem prevention business. So I'm very pro. I really don't think they're going to listen to my phone calls. I'm very pro a strong national security agency because we need them to prevent. We need them to proactively go after people who are about to attack us. Because we proved this doesn't work, this is too late. So that's very important. We need a national narrative. There is no narrative. Of the 535 members of Congress, only about 25 to 30 of those have any technical background whatsoever, and so they're off thinking about maybe getting elected again. They're all thinking about other things, including cybersecurity. There is no real national discussion of this. And this is the reason I go around speaking, is because I think it's important for Americans to know that we are at risk. Power grid and financial system in particular. That's why I wrote my column, that's why I wrote my book. The book is a novel, but it's based on fact and fiction. And it is a warning of what things could be like. And so we're trying to broadcast the problem. Now, is it going to take a major event to get Congress and to get the government moving on this? Leon Panetta had his thing. He said it may take a cyber Pearl Harbor to get people going. But I do know, I don't know about that, but I do know that we don't want another 9/11 incident of a cyber nature to have to memorialize. So I'll stop there and be happy to take your questions. Thank you.
What are your suggestions for us individually to protect ourselves or be prepared the best we can without any national capability to help?
Have you considered New Zealand? Now that sounds funny. There isn't a lot you can do. I mean, you can keep track of your identity theft with a company like LifeLock if you want to use them. Certainly you want your critical passwords to be fairly obtuse, although don't have, I mean, the Wall Street Journal password, who cares? Let them have it. The problem with the passwords is If they want your password, they're going to go get it. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be 30 characters long. It's gone. So be very careful from an email standpoint of what you click on, I think is the best advice I can give anybody, because that's where a lot of it comes from. Secondly, do not take a thumb drive, one of those little flash drives, from anybody you don't know and put it in your machine, ever. Very dangerous. Yes, question up here. Yes,
With all of this redundancy and everybody knowing everything, how can these mysterious email processes have occurred in portion?
which ones? Which email
IRS.
addresses? The IRS?
There were emails that were
Oh,
passed around.
that they mysteriously disappeared.
Disappeared, yeah.
Well, I mean, you could get cynical and say that those disappeared because of internal sabotage. That's one opinion. You don't see, I've been in corporate life forever, you don't just see things disappearing like that. It's just, there's always backup. There's always a good solid system, particularly in the IRS. This isn't the post office that's run, weird.
Probably in China or Russia.
Yeah, there's one in the back. Yes, sir.
So you mentioned the NSA, that's our security. I feel like the NSA is politicized.
Yes, sir.
I don't trust them anymore, and I trust the IRS, the banks, or,
And the fact that they are could very well be the case. Right now, they're basically the only agency that A, has a chance of protecting us, and B, has a clue of what they're doing. Because here's the situation. The military, as far as this whole situation, the military gets it. The military is staffing up, spending money, big contractors, the cyber industrial complex is now called Lockheed Martin, Boeing, they all have big cyber operations contracting. Military gets it. The corporations are starting to get it because of losses and the lawsuits. And the government does not get it. And as long as that's the case, then we're in trouble. I personally think the NSA is the only chance we have. Personally.
one more thing. What's your opinion on Snowden?
Traitor.
Traitor? Okay.
Traitor money. Yes, sir, behind you.
With all these threats, the countries, the terrorists, the militias, why hasn't these catastrophic events occurred already? If they have such great, reach and capabilities, you think it already would have been done by now?
Well, it depends on your point of view. Now, the things with regard to the Navy and with regard to intellectual property and with regard to the banks, all of that is factual. That is not something that hasn't happened. The power grids would be a major move and would be an act of war. So anybody who's going to act would have to be very, very careful. Now, my personal theory is that the countries that have the capability to do that don't want to. China because they need our money, Russia because we would retaliate, Iran because we wouldn't give them their bomb. And those who want to do it don't have the ability yet. And I would put the ISIS groups in that. When the groups that want to but can't get up to the point where they can, pick a time frame, 3 years, then we're in trouble. And that's why. Now, that's why Russia may get into our power grid. They're not going to bring it down. We can do just the same to theirs, or worse. Yes, sir.
And would that be detrimental to Russia, China, and the other groups that don't want this to happen? If ISIS does do something like that?
I'd say that Russia is not going to institute it, China is not going to institute it, Iran is not going to institute it, no one can control the ISIS groups or the militias. Yes, sir, back.
Does Israel have the potential to stave off a cyber attack?
Okay, does Israel have the ability to stave off cyber attacks? Israel is, if you look at the world in terms of cyber security capabilities, Israel would have to be in the top 3. I put the United States, Russia, and Israel. Very, very advanced. Because, everybody's attacking Israel. So they need those defenses. So Yeah, I'd say that they're very good, not that they're immune. They are. Yes, sir.
Yeah, to the extent you can say, or I don't know, you talk about coming wars, I mean, we have to have an offensive position. Are we doing that? I mean, are we counterattacking? Are we letting these countries know that we're, seriously in the business and counterattacking and so on?
Well, are we counterattacking or are we preemptively attacking?
Either way.
Okay. Well, a lot of that is not public knowledge to my knowledge. But B, my understanding is that both the NSA and the Cybercom have very strong, powerful capabilities to do just the things I'm talking about people can do this to others. But again, you get into the power grid situation, you get into bringing down the economy, you are in war at that point in time. And the question becomes, what is the retaliation from the other organization? If we knew that Russia had taken down our power grid and that we were going to have massive death, I doubt that we would just sit there and not let some missiles take care of it. Yes, sir?
And didn't the United States have a hand in the destruction of the centrifuges in Iran?
Okay, talking about the Stuxnet centrifuge situation with Iran, where we put, yes, and no one's admitted to it, but it's all assumed that it was us and Israel trying to slow down their nuclear program in Iran, and it worked, but it's not gone. In the back, that's all.
Well, listening to your conversation this morning, you've got all of us about 3/4 scared to death. But it's my opinion, from what you're talking about, with all the technology that's out there today, our military is shrinking. Their military, and I'm talking about China, is building. With them having 2.5 million people, boots on the ground, and we have less than 1.5 million, and half of those are reserves. I don't look at us as ever being in a big war here. And the reason why I say that is if China wants to do something to us, the last thing they'd do is put a bomb on top of the food plate. Because what China needs to us, and listening to your conversation, is China could come around with their fleet, circle the United States, bring a few million people over here and say, guess what, folks? You are now going to be talking to us and not to Washington, D.C., and we own the joint. By the way, we loaned you the money, we want it back, so instead of getting the money back, we'll just go ahead and take the food, and you work for us now. And there's no need for any argument about it, because why would they want to blow us up?
Exactly.
When we're the people that actually feed them, and
Exactly.
no more than one way.
Now, who thinks building the cities?
So what you're talking about really hits home with me. I mean, I spent half of my life in the military in 2 different services, traveled the world. I know exactly what you're talking about, and I feel that you are dead on exactly what you talked about this morning.
Thank you.
I'm sorry to say that I agree with you.
It's sad.
That's
It's sad
the way
in my
it can
heart.
be. And I don't believe we'll ever see an atomic bomb unless it's some rogue outfit and we can do something to them, but what good would it do? The thing about it is, I don't believe all these bomb things are scared to us at all, because people need the United States, the breadbasket of the world, to feed them, and China being the number
Well,
one.
yes, and weaponry is changing. I mean, the F-35 is a 5th generation aircraft, evidently very sophisticated. But just because China has the plans doesn't mean they can build it. I mean, we can't build it either. So why can they build it?
You've been talking there for 10.
But there's talk within the Air Force that the 6th generation plane would in fact be pilotless. And that we will get to that point. So it's all changing. But the cyber threat takes that out of the equation. Yes, sir, there's another question.
I just was wondering, do you have a website that a lot of people need to get educated on this, where they can go and hear your, a presentation? I wish you had this on DVD. I would hate to say, but I would
We
make
just
copies and pass
We just
it out.
filmed it. Just filmed it. Yes, my website has a lot of the articles that discuss this. Cyberwarfaretoday.com.
Cyberwarfare.com.
Today.com. And my national column is in Security Week, and I usually address higher level issues there. I'm
I
being
just
cut
got
off.
one last question, because I understand everything you said. The biggest issue would be trying to determine if and when they do attack, who did it, so you'd know how to respond.
Yes, sir.
My concern would be, with all the sophistication that we have, yet the Malaysia airplane has never been found.
Yeah.
And so it raises the question, with all of our knowledge, all of our skill sets, sometimes there's still something missing.
There is. Well, they have, give it time, give the Malaysian airliners, how long did it take them to find the Air France
2 years.
plane? 2 years?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Great question.